Well, the coronavirus outbreak certainly forcing many of us to work from home and have remote meetings. Children also are using home streaming for movies and playing lots and lots of video games. It means having fast, affordable and reliable home internet has become a huge asset, not necessarily a necessity. But we'll get to that in a moment. What are the options available to us and what's not going to break the bank? Tech engineer developer Taylor Gibbs joining us now via Skype. Hello to you, Taylor. Good to have you with us. We'll talk a little bit about those who can't necessarily fork out thousands of rands for good internet in the moment. We need to take that into consideration. First, Taylor, just how much of an increase do you think we've seen with online internet usage?
So I think that we've seen a huge increase. I mean, any industry that can go online, I think, has now gone online. Simple things that we used to do, like shopping, you can now get done in an hour if you have an app and you live in a supported area. So I think that we've seen an exponential increase in data demand.
And when it comes to those who didn't necessarily use the internet before coronavirus, Taylor, for everything in the entire world, they would maybe go on and surf Google or something like that. Do you think we're seeing more and more people who wouldn't have ordinarily used the internet now plugging in and going online and doing, or basically living their entire life through the web?
I think that the change we're seeing was inevitable with time, but I think what coronavirus has done is just kind of exacerbated that due date for this kind of technology. So I think that the younger generations are definitely jumping on board and we're seeing more usage. But I've also seen a ton of older people really battling to get to grips with the technology.
It's always fun teaching older people how to use a new app on their phone. All right, Taylor, let's talk a little bit about options. It was one of the reasons I wanted to chat to you. What are the options available to us? Because as you and I both know, data in this country is not necessarily cheap. So we've got to be careful with where we spend our money.
Yeah, so I think that our mobile data is still fairly expensive, in my opinion. But I think our fixed line options that we have available in the country compete pretty well in the international market in terms of pricing. That's fiber, etc. So the problem is that infrastructure isn't available everywhere. So we're seeing more and more low-cost mobile operators come on board. So one thing that comes to mind is Rain. One of my retail businesses has a Rain SIM card, and it's basically uncapped internet between 8 and 5. I think it goes a little bit longer than that. But for a business, you pay 250 Rand a month and my whole business can run off that mobile data. So I guess it really depends on your needs and what options you have available to you in your area.
Taylor, as a tech engineer developer, I realize you don't work for one of the big telecoms, and I'm not asking you to speak on their behalf, but if you can have an organization, I think you mentioned the name Rain, it's a well-known service provider, how are they able to provide data at such a low rate when you compare it to some of the other big players? I've never understood that.
So I think that what Rain does is they provide uncapped data during non-peak periods. So they're providing it during times when people are generally at work. And then when it comes to the peak hours, they shut you off. And I think that you'll find that the operators rarely make their money during those peak hours. So Rain is just capitalizing on the non-peak hour traffic, basically.
So do you think that mobile data operators can significantly lower their costs? They're just capitalizing, as you said, on peak times. They do have the ability, the technology does exist. They can lower those rates. They're just refusing to.
I don't think that's the case. I think that you'll find that their costs are very high. When you think of things like theft and how many batteries go missing, we've got other challenges like load shedding. That infrastructure is extremely expensive to maintain. So I think that there is room for improvement. But we also have to understand from the infrastructure perspective, it doesn't really help if our infrastructure is getting tarnished every week.
No, fair enough. Now, I do want to discuss with you, if you could, Taylor, we've spoken about mobile data. It's very expensive. We all know that. And not everybody has access to fixed line data, whether that's, I think it would be fiber or anything like that. There's a large majority of people in this country who simply cannot afford a luxury like that. And I'm going to use the word luxury deliberately. What are the options for them? They're being left out of this, and communication is a human right.
So you raise a very valid point, And I think that we're getting to a stage where access to the internet almost needs to become a human right. But until then, I mean, so during this COVID period, I've worked on a number of projects, and I've seen companies using very creative ways to get around the data problem and people not having airtime and data. So some solutions I've seen use USSD, which they can reverse charge back to the company who's operating the service. And that's a very low-cost way to communicate with users that don't necessarily have smartphones, airtime, or data.
How does one do that? Explain that USSD to me just before I say goodbye, Taylor. I'm not the most tech-savvy guy in the world.
So USSD is like you would dial star something something star 1 hash, and then it would bring up a menu on your phone, and you could reply 1, and then it would take you to another menu. So it walks you through the steps to achieve whatever business process you would like to do. But the nice thing about USSD is you can actually reverse charge that so that the cost doesn't fall onto the consumer.
Last question to you, Taylor. Thank you. You've been great in helping me understand this. Is there a way that can help with interpersonal communication?
Not off the top of my head, but I think it's a very creative way for brands and organizations to interact with users without using data.
That would be the ultimate goal, wouldn't it? Taylor Gibb, thank you very much indeed for joining us via Skype. Tech engineer developer joining us here on ENCA about how some of the more reliable ways of staying connected. Of course, if you can afford it, then obviously a fixed line is the way to go. But there are options for low-cost mobile operators as well. At least we're moving in the right direction.